Just the other day, I was sitting in my office and I had one of our respiratory technicians at the hospital come in. She was jonesing for a cup of coffee, and the fact that I had a Keurig in the office brought her in. But we got talking about life, and she was telling me about her parrot. She has this parrot that she has been caring for the last few years, and she was really wishing that this bird would close its mouth. It's been talking just a bit too much and driving her nuts. Well, the competitive side of me kicked in, and I suddenly felt that I needed to tell her the story of my growing up and having 200 exotic birds living in our family's den. My father bred them for pet stores, and we had a variety of animals growing up. And so Kelly and I started talking back and forth about animals and animals that have been part of our lives, and she told me about the dogs and cats and guinea pigs that she had grown up with, and I countered with my discussion about goats and chickens. And of course we had very similar upbringings with animals all over the place. But I remember those chickens. There's nothing like fresh eggs. And of course you know this better than most. Fresh eggs are a delightful thing. They don't taste like the eggs that you get when you go to the grocery store. They've got a flavor that just bursts. Those yolks are such a bright gold, you can hardly believe it when you crack open your first one. Occasionally you get the double yolk egg, which is just a thing of magnificence. So my family, we kept chickens, and we had a big enclosure with nesting boxes that were built into it. And we had maybe a dozen or so. I remember one day, though, when things went terribly wrong. There was a huge noise of cackling coming from the nesting boxes, and my father, who was in the garage, heard it. And he knew what was going on immediately. He went trotting out to the chicken enclosure, and he grabbed a garden hoe as he went. And he went in, and I heard him say some words that as a young man I knew that I was not allowed to say. And he came out with an 8-foot black snake that met its demise there in the yard, courtesy of the garden hoe. It turned out that the snake, being a snake, had decided that the best thing in the world was eggs, and had gone in, sliding through, had found an egg and had eaten it, had found another egg and had eaten it, and the hens decided that this was not how this was supposed to happen. And they set up their cackling, and one of the hens had advanced on the snake, trying to scare it off. It didn't work. In fact, when my father pulled the snake out, he pulled the chicken, or what was left of the hen, with it, crushed and half swallowed by the snake. It's one of those images that stays with you. You're welcome. But I think of that hen that day who stood up against the snake and lost. And I think about our reading from Luke, where Jesus is told, "Get out of here, Herod is out to kill you." And Jesus says, "You go and tell that fox that I have to be here today and tomorrow, and then I'll be on the road, and then he can do whatever he wants, because we know that he can't kill me while I'm here. I have to be in Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets." And then Jesus looked across the valley at Jerusalem and began to weep. Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets, how I would have gathered you under my wings, as a mother hen gathers her chicks. But you weren't willing. Jesus creates this image of himself as a mother hen, as one who would spread his wings and advance against, well, in this case, an old wily fox, not a snake, but it had the same result, didn't it? It seems strange, though, doesn't it, that Jesus would have chosen this hen image. I mean, there are so many tougher, more impressive animals he could have picked. He could have been a rooster at least, right? But no, roosters don't do that. It's the hens. It's you ladies who always seem to be the mama bears protecting the cubs, who seem to be the mama lions making sure that nothing goes wrong. So maybe it makes sense that Jesus picked the mother hen, the one gathering her brood under her wings for protection, even though it wasn't the most macho image he could have come up with. I think there's another reason, though, that he picked that image of the mother hen. Chicks don't tend to be the most, how shall I say this delicately, the most intelligent. Yeah, let's just, you said it, not me. Suddenly I feel like a politician. She said it, not me. Anyway, we'll move on from that. But yeah, chicks don't tend to be the most intelligent. They'll go scattering with the rainstorm instead of coming in where it's safe. They'll go out pecking up bugs, not paying any attention to the shadow of the hawk that circles overhead. And chicks, indeed, if not protected aggressively, will end up lunch for somebody else. We're a lot like that. We go off our own way, we do our own thing, we tell ourselves that we're tough and smart, we can do whatever we darn well please, and we get into trouble. We're like those chicks that weren't willing, that wouldn't be gathered under the mother's wings. But you know, most of us don't actually end up as lunch. Most of us grow up to become mother hens ourselves. Even us guys, I hope. You know, as we grow into the fullness of our personhood, as we step into that adult faith, we find that we often spread our wings, just as Jesus spread his. As we offer protection and care to others, as we stand bravely against those who would bring harm to others. The psalmist wrote, "God is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? God is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and my foes, they shall stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war rise up against me, yet I will be confident." You know, I'm sure Jesus had read those words any number of times. These words from the hymnal of the Jewish people. He had sung them, I'm sure. And so when it came time for him to stand up, he could point to those words of comfort and assurance. Whom shall I fear? Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me, they shall stumble and fall. And so Jesus, like the mother hen, was able to protect his followers. Realizing that for him it wasn't going to go well, but that wasn't the fear. That was the confidence. Knowing that in offering himself, he was indeed making things better for others. It wasn't just about Him. In the same way that our faith isn't just about us. All too often we hear, particularly on television, preachers telling us that if we're only faithful, that everything's going to go perfectly in our lives, that there are miracles that are ready to pour down upon us. And I can tell you miracles do happen. But more often than not, they don't, which is why they're called miracles rather than just the way things are. The reality is life is hard. You've probably noticed that. Life is hard. Sometimes we end up having to protect others, and it doesn't go so well for us, just as it didn't go so well for Jesus. But you know, that's okay. Here it is, February. We're in the season of Lent. We're paying attention to Christ's suffering and death. It's also Black History Month, and we're paying attention to those who, working with the civil rights movement, offered themselves to protect others. It's an ongoing struggle, working for justice for all of God's people. And so my prayer, sisters and brothers, is that we might be more like Jesus. That we might look danger in the face, that we might say, yeah, that old fox got away, because right now I have work to do. That we might open our wings to protect others, to bring justice, to bring peace, to bring love and hope. Because that's where our faith really matters. Not in those warm, fuzzy feelings that we get when we sing our favorite hymns, but in those difficult times when we can't see a way that we're going to get out of this situation, but we stand courageously anyway. May God then bless us, giving us hearts of service, giving us courage, giving us peace, and yes, giving us strength. Amen.